Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some monster news coming out for the Oregon Duck fans Thursday morning. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, agreeing to a monster contract, 6 years, $11 million annually, making him a top five paid head coach in the country heading into 2025. I don't think there's a single Oregon fan that's looking at this news and shaking their head. I mean, this is huge, not only for the Oregon fans, but this Oregon Ducks program. You have one of the best head coaches in all of college football that is staying in Eugene for the foreseeable future. Now, there's going to be some opinions of other college football fans of different programs that certainly have some takes in this as well. But within the Oregon fan base, I think you guys appreciate the job that Dan Lanning has done and appreciate how big of news this is. It's hard to hold on to your head coaches for that long. And Dan Lanning seems to love it in Eugene. The Oregon fans love Dan Lanning in Eugene. It seems to be just a partnership, a match that is made in heaven. And I want to kind of take a second to look at and evaluate what Dan Lanning has done within this Oregon program over the last couple of years and talk about why this is well deserved for Dan Lanning going into 2025. Before we get into it, as always, the Oregon fans, y'all, let it fly in the comment section. We've talked a lot about this program over the last couple of weeks. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the boys has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. And I want to take this time, this piece of news, to kind of just reflect on the job that Dan Lanning has done within this Oregon program the last couple of years. And let's just start with consistent, steady improvement. And I think it starts with, hey, let's go look back at where this Oregon program began under Dan Lanning, where it is at right now going into 2025. The Oregon fans certainly remember this. I don't think a lot of the casual college football fans remember it because you just think of Dan Lanning and Oregon as kind of a buzzsaw in college football right now. When Dan Lanning's first game at this Oregon program was against Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. You lost that game 49-3. Did not even look like a football team that belonged on the football field with a national championship caliber program like Georgia. You fast forward to where this program is right now and how we talk about this Oregon Ducks program, it is night and day different from what we remember when Dan Lanning first took over this program. And it's been consistent, steady improvement, right? 10-3 in 2022, 11-2 in 2023. 13-1 in 2024, was almost wire to wire the number one team in the country until the college football playoffs. From an on-field performance, on-field results, you can't really ask for much more in terms of what Dan Lanning is doing at Oregon. The second thing you always kind of evaluate head coaches, hey, what are you doing in the talent acquisition department? It's been elite for Oregon. And that's really where it starts. I mean, most college football fans who are listening to this in early March, y'all follow the sport pretty closely. You want to be an elite program across the landscape of college football. It starts with recruiting at an elite level at the high school ranks, and that's exactly what Dan Lanning has done. For some reason, there's this narrative around this Oregon program that they're transfer portal heavy. Just because they use the transfer portal and have success using the transfer portal does not mean they don't recruit the high school ranks. In 2025 was the number 2 high school recruiting class in the country. And 2024 is the number 4 high school recruiting class in the country. You look at the transfer portal rankings, number 4 transfer portal class in the country in 2025, number 2 transfer portal class in the country in 2024. The talent acquisition has been elite. And if you're asking me about a program that I think is adjusting to the new era of roster building using both the high school ranks and the transfer portal, I don't think there's many programs that are doing it better than Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks. There are going to be some college football fans that say, well, yeah, it's easy when you have all this money at your disposal. I don't know why in this conversation, Dan Lanning does not get credit. If you want boosters to pay some money to help for you on the recruiting trail, you got to be able to stimulate that energy around the program. And look at Dan Lanning. He's one of the most energetic head coaches that you see in the country. Why is Oregon getting such great financial backing? It's because Dan Lanning's out there working on raising money. And when you show the results that you're showing on the football field, you ain't got to try that hard to try to bolster up that funding because people believe in what you're doing. And so I don't get in that conversation with Dan Lanning as a recruiter, like it or not. I guess this is where you should start, like it or not. as a head coach, part of your job is, fundraising and generating the buzz around your program. There's not many head coaches, if any, that do it better than Dan Lanning at Oregon. Number three, and another thing that for some reason is like people kind of try to knock Dan Lanning for, and that's player development. I mean, one, we've talked about this a lot. He has not been there nearly enough for you to start knocking the high school recruiting and high school development. He's only going into year 4. Number two, there's a lot of examples of guys getting better at football when they join this Oregon program, whether it's on the high school trail or whether it's through the transfer portal. Look at a guy like Tez Johnson. I mean, Tez Johnson coming from Troy, nobody knew the name. Nobody thought he was going to be the kind of player that he developed into at Oregon over the last 2 years. People thought Bo Nix was a 5-star washout. He comes to Eugene, Oregon, becomes a Heisman caliber quarterback, and now a very successful NFL quarterback. Look at Derek Carmen last year. Derek Carmen was good at Michigan State. He wasn't elite. Derek Carmen kind of grew into one of the more dominant interior defensive linemen that you saw in the country. The same conversation with a guy like Jordan Birch. Or what about guys like Mateo or Tatum Tuioti, from the high school trail, developing in the pipeline? Two of the better edge rushers that we see in the country going into 2025. There's a long list of player development that Dan Lanning and Oregon are going through over the last couple of years. And then lastly, and this is another really important metric here, is what are you doing hiring a staff around you? It's one of the best coaching staffs in the country. He started with Kenny Dillingham, who after 1 year got a head coaching job at Arizona State. So that was a damn good hire. And then you go out and hire Will Stein, who's considered one of the best offensive coordinators in the country going into 2025. And not just considered when he is one, because the offenses that he's run the last 2 years have been elite. Quarterback development as good. Elite Terry's doing a great job on the offensive line. I look at just about every single metric. And if you were to take a checklist in terms of evaluating a head coach and kind of saying, are they one of the best head coaches in college football? Talent acquisition, on-field results, player development, coaching hires. I probably should add culture as number 5. I might just do that right now. I'll just add number 5, and we're going to say culture. Hopefully I spelled it right. You're going quick there. The culture within Eugene, Oregon is one of, if not the best in the country. And so I look at all the things that you want to use to evaluate a head coach. Dan Lanning does not have a single box left unchecked besides his national championship next to his name. And if you're an Oregon fan, you kind of feel that if things continue to go their way they're going at Oregon, at some point down the road, we're going to be talking about a national championship. And just because he hasn't won a national championship in his first 3 years at Oregon does not mean he's a bad head football coach. And that's kind of what you're seeing in the comment section on Twitter and the message boards. Hasn't won anything, doesn't deserve this contract. How long did it take Ryan Day to win a national championship? Or Nick Saban at Alabama, Kirby Smart at Georgia? Head coaches do not join programs and win national championships immediately. Not to mention that just not a lot of head coaches in the country, period, that have won national championships. This program, if they stay on track and everything continues the way they're going, I don't know if it's going to be in 2025 or 2026 or 2027, a national championship you feel confident is coming to Eugene, Oregon. If the track if the train stays on the track, so to speak. And how do you keep the train on the track? You go out and lock in your head coach. The massive hire. And I don't think I'm trying to convince any Oregon fans of this. Probably trying to do a little bit more convincing of some other college football fans that are listening to this. Really, really good news for Oregon. The outlook, the future, extremely bright for this program. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.